T minus 30 hours before the Major League Trade Deadline expires. And so far in the American League, there's been a lot of really interesting decisions and big moves made. I'm Steve Feck, host of Slasher Sports Baseball podcast, AL Slash Lines and Central Intelligence. We're going to focus on the American League for right now. And you'll notice that there is a poll up that you can vote on. Even if you're not watching live, you can leave the results and your feelings and your comments after the live show. And it's basically, which ALGM has had the best trade deadline. Is it Chris Young of the Rangers? Is it Perry Manasian of the Angels? Is it Rick Hahn of the White Sox? Or is it a GM to be named later? Well, plenty of time to vote. We look forward to sharing your results on all of our social media, as well as here on the Slasher Sports Baseball Facebook group. Remember the 90s claymation show, Celebrity Deathmatch? I mean, it goes back to MTV's days when they had, Daria and Beavis and Butthead. But Celebrity Deathmatch is a true classic, and it was always had, exaggerated claymation models of two really big celebrities that either didn't like each other or you tried to imagine that they didn't like each other or there was some kind of competition. Well, really, we have a GM death match going on in the American League right now. Uh, the one in the AL East, I don't think it's really taken form yet. And we'll talk about that, here in a little bit. But I want to focus on what's probably the match that's gotten the most publicity, and that is the AL West battle between Chris Young of the Texas Rangers and Perry Manasian of the California or Anaheim or Los Angeles Angels, however you want to dub them. I mean, those two are slugging it out in the days before the trade deadline, and my guess is that neither of them is done quite yet. Now, the Rangers have done the splashier moves, perhaps. They have gone out and they have answered all the questions about their starting pitching, which again, DeGrom is out for the year. Now you got Nathan Eovaldi. He's already had two Tommy Johns, having a forearm strain. So Chris Young didn't hesitate. He has the payroll budget. He has the ownership's backing as far as, okay, here's our checkbook. You write the checks you need to write. And they went out and got Max Scherzer. That's certainly the splashiest name. And the other cool thing about that deal is that the Mets, not only did they pay almost $36 million to move Scherzer along, they got Scherzer to agree to waive the no trade clause. He got them to agree to, in essence, saying, yes, I'm going to play for the Texas Rangers next year, unless the Rangers, for some reason, would want to trade him in the offseason. But in essence, he said, yes, I'm exercising my player option for 2024 right now. They did move, Ronald Acuna Jr.'s little brother, Luis Angel Acuna. He's an infielder by trade. He's the number 44 overall MLB prospect. My guess is that the Mets are going to groom him to be their long-term center fielder. He has the athleticism to do it. He has the speed to do it. I don't know that his glove is so outstanding that you hate to move him off of the middle infield. I mean, he's a shortstop now. He probably projects out to play second base at the major league level. But I think if you could have a talent like that move to center field, and it's going to be 2 years, it'll be 2025 before Acuna would be willing, or not willing, but would be able to patrol center field at Citi Field. It is a deal where the Mets are reimagining themselves on the fly. They're trying to maximize the payroll dollars that Steve Cohen has no problem spending. But let's get back to the Texas Rangers. Max Scherzer immediately demands respect on the mound, even if he's not the Max Scherzer that we all know from his Cy Young days or whatever. Max Scherzer is going to make opponents take notice. And if that wasn't enough, they probably pulled off an even better deal with the St. Louis Cardinals. They acquired Jordan Montgomery and Chris Stratton, both free agents to be, from the St. Louis Cardinals for really mid-level prospects in their organization. I don't know, is Chris Young using his Princeton education and somehow hypnotizing other GMs to take whatever it is that he's offering up? I don't really know. But in essence, Chris Young has absolutely gone all in on the 2023 season and beyond. The moves he's making are not ending here. There's no reason that they can't re-sign Jordan Montgomery. And really, I think the most important acquisition in that trade, as good as Jordan Montgomery has been, I mean, at one point this year, Jordan Montgomery had more quality starts than every other Cardinal starter combined. But Chris Stratton, not only has he pitched for Bruce Bochy, which gives that familiarity. Bochy knows what to expect from Stratton, the kind of stuff that he has. But Stratton can pitch multi-innings, multi-roles. He can pitch at the end of the game. He can do that Andrew Miller thing, so maybe you bring him in and pitch the sixth and the seventh. He's just a terrific major league pitcher. He's one of those guys that gets ignored because he doesn't light up radar guns and he's not an analytics darling. But Chris Stratton may be the most important acquisition that the Rangers have made so far. That's how I think impactful he can be. Now, in the other corner in this AL West GM death match, you got Perry Manassian. He studied at the feet of the best deadline dealer in Major League front offices right now. And that includes, my personal hero, Dave Dombrowski. He studied at the feet of Alex Anthopoulos, who executed the best trade deadline in 2015 when he was running the Blue Jays that I can remember in my lifetime, personally. I mean, and that's saying a lot. But Manassian has that confidence. He has a knack at looking at the landscape and knowing what he can and can't do and targeting talents that fit his team's needs. Now, I know a lot of people think, this is all about, trying to make sure that Shohei Ohtani re-signs, going forward with the Angels. Now, I'm sure that plays a part of it. I mean, the Angels and Artie Moreno and Manassian are trying to show Ohtani, look, we can win, and we can win consistently with the talent we have here. But that's not just the whole ballgame. The Angels, I think, now have the longest non-playoff streak in the American League now that the Mariners, broke that streak last year. So it's a reward for the fans, but more importantly, it's a reward for the players in that locker room. Not only the young guys that they've developed in the system, but, the Mike Trouts, and the Anthony Rendones, and the Brandon Drurys, and the other veteran guys that are on that roster. It's time for them. They want to win just as much as anyone else wants to win. So Manassian obviously made the first splash, going, to the White Sox, acquiring Giolito, acquiring an effective bullpen piece in Reynaldo Lopez. What he's been giving up in these trades are basically pieces that he not only either accumulated through his first two drafts, and we'll talk about that more when we discuss the trade with the Rockies that he made, but in essence, they traded away a catcher, well regarded, international free agent from Cuba, because they have Ohapi, and he's their long-term answering catcher. So that guy was not going to dislodge Ohapi, in my opinion. I don't think that would ever happen. They also have, you know, they don't have the best farm system, but they have the young pitcher that they traded away was not going to break into a Griffin Canning, Reed Detmers, uh, Griffin Canning, Barreria, some of the other young pitchers that they have at upper levels. He wasn't going to surpass them. So fine, move him along to the White Sox. The White Sox can project out where those guys are going to be. But the deal with the Rockies that came down late on Sunday, right now, that's my favorite trade deadline deal to date. That is a deal that actually helps both teams. CJ Cron and Randall Grichuk fill different roles, different ways. Grichuk immediately upgrades the outfield defense, especially in the absence of Mike Trout. More importantly, it adds Cron as a bat, and one is going to do better against right-hand pitching. One's going to do better against left-hand pitching as far as upgrades. Losing Taylor Ward for the year on that very scary pitch to the face from the arm of Alek Manoah in Sunday's game. It was a big, big get here. So, who's going to win the GM death match in the AL West? Is it going to be Chris Young because it's going to be splashier bids? Or is it going to be Perry Manassian because he's bringing in the role players and improving the pitching staff in subtle ways without giving up nearly as much, maybe perhaps, as Chris Young, at least on paper, may have given up. Now we need to look at the AL Central too, because the GM death match there is basically between the White Sox front office and the Detroit Tigers front office. The Tigers need to send gifts to Hahn and Williams in Chicago because they now are going to benefit from the fact that the White Sox acted early and set the market. They are now going to reap better returns on their deals for Michael Lorenzen and Eduardo Rodriguez. I think it's safe to say that both of those guys are going to go. I think the Tigers are going to be last day players as far as this trade deadline goes. But now they're going to get even more for those two pitchers than they might have had they gone out and tried to set the market themselves, or if they were just saying, well, let's just see. We'll take the best offer we get and the first best offer that we get. So that celebrity death match is going to be more subtle, and it's going to be more long term as far as determining which GM actually wins there, which front office actually wins. But it is still intriguing. We're not talking the top two teams in the division, the Guardians, and the Twins. The Twins, I think, have a half game lead on the Guardians now. So it's not those two teams. I mean, those two teams, if they make moves, I don't know what they will be. I think the Guardians acquired Syndergaard to flip him, and if he pitches well here on Monday night, I think that allows them to maybe increase whatever return they can get for them. I can't imagine they're going to keep him down the stretch. I don't think Syndergaard really improves their pitching staff, their starting pitching rotation enough to do that. But also, you have the Twins, who I think need to stand pat. There's hope they can hold off the Guardians. Again, don't get to vote on the poll. If you're not watching live, you can vote on the poll after the fact. Just in the comment section. You don't need to say, "Oh, well, I can't click on here and vote live." But basically, your options are in the poll, which ALGM has had the best trade deadline. It's Chris Young of the Rangers, Perry Manassian of the Angels, Rick Hahn of the White Sox. Because again, I think Hahn, I would have hoped they would have gotten more pieces that would be major league ready a little quicker. But I mean, they're certainly restocking their system, and I think considering where they were spinning their wheels at this point with another disappointing season, I think that they brought in enough talent to justify the moves they made. Or is it going to be a GM to be named later? So that's going to segue us into the AL East. And the GM death match happening in the AL East is going to be between Eric Neander in Tampa Bay and Mike Elias in Baltimore. So far, except for a minor deal, Fujinami coming in, a nice gamble as far as a hard-throwing bullpen piece on the haps of the Orioles, it's been pretty quiet. I mean, the team making all the noise in the AL East so far has been the Toronto Blue Jays and them picking up Jordan Hicks for two really solid Double-A pitching prospects. But, and I know that Peter Bendix has the title of general manager in Tampa Bay, and I know he has a very strong voice in whatever moves they choose to make. In all reality, Eric Neander is the guy you associate with the Rays and the Rays front office and some of the highway robbery they have committed, since he was first named general manager of the club. So for our discussion, we're going to make it Neander versus Elias because it's splashier. Again, this is our take on celebrity deathmatch with GM deathmatch. Both teams could use some offensive upgrades. I think more the Rays than the Orioles. And that's might be hard to fathom because the Rays got off to such a terrific start, overall, but certainly, their lineup was just crushing the ball. People have cooled off. Do you want to bring in somebody to perhaps solidify third base or solidify second base? Do you want to? Every team can use an outfield bat, so maybe Tampa Bay is looking at that. With the Orioles, I think the most obvious need is going to be in the starting rotation. Now, at this point, most of the guys you would say are going to have an immediate impact in a positive way on the American League East divisional race. They're all gone. And Tampa Bay, it's too bad that the Rays and Orioles logistically can't make a deal. Usually I don't mind teams in the same division making trades. That's generally an off-season thing. But the Rays have at least 10, if not a dozen, starting pitching, either prospects or guys on the roster now, that could stake a claim to a rotation slot in 2024. So they've got that controllable young pitching, that projectable young pitching that the Orioles would love to bring in, but really you can't. If you're Peter Bendix or Eric Neander, you cannot offer the Orioles the starting pitching help they need when you're trying to now catch them after they had chased you down. And if you're the Orioles, you can't afford to give them offensive upgrades in order to improve your pitching. You need to find it elsewhere. Who is going to be able to do it first? Who's going to be able to do it more effectively? Who's going to be that perhaps GM to be named later in our poll that you see up, on the screen? Again, it's which AL GM has had best trade deadline. Chris Young of the Rangers, Perry Manassian of the Angels, Rick Hahn of the White Sox, or a GM to be named later. This story in the American League East is going to be played out over, now it's under 30 hours before the trade deadline hits. So we'll take a look and see how everything plays out. We'll be back here in Slasher Sports Baseball, both here on our Facebook group as well on social media, giving our takes on all of the trade deadline moves. We focused on the American League now. We're going to talk about the National League Central later on this evening about 6 o'clock Eastern Time. Thanks for tuning in, and check out our videos on our YouTube channel. I'm Steve Beck.